One of the more frustrating parts of being a person who doesn't identify with either party is that oftentimes I am assumed by those who just happen to check something out to be part of one party whenever I critique the other. So, for example, a person who clicks this video or stream afterward without any idea of who I am will assume, oh, that's some conservative person trying to badmouth the Democrat to make uh, the other party look good or something to that effect. And I've said before, and this is the old envoy, I've stated in the past, I have no level of liking for either party. And let me also clarify before we begin, because I didn't want to keep harping on something I thought people understood, at least in a massive number at this point, judging from the last presidential election. But I keep having these individuals who it's like they're stuck on nostalgia. They still think it's 2008 where none of this has happened yet. So let me preface this by saying that I liked Obama's handling of Cuba and the Iran nuclear deal, um, as well as his backing of gay rights in the second term, which, I have a problem with what he did regarding that for both his first term and his presidential campaign. Let me say hello to this Maxi individual, um, who I'm not familiar with, but whatever. So where do we begin? Well, I think we should preface this by going into, um, I guess, the most chronological order of things, starting with Obamacare. So, um, I think, and look, I don't support conservative efforts to repeal it. What always gets me is that you have a lot of establishment media, right? So whether it's CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and they call Obamacare this liberal plan that undermines conservative ideas, not realizing, and yet somehow I'm supposed to believe that this is now a left wing idea. It's really a right wing view, plan that has kind of shifted to the other party as conservatives or Republicans anyway that are holding office have gotten more right wing, so more radicalized in one direction. And the Democrats call themselves being moderates, which, that's debatable. But let me read what Envoy said. It's funny how rhetoric always gets spin dependent on personality rather than what the president actually did. No, but that's what's amusing to me, because a lot of times when you were sitting there and you were watching this past election cycle, people were talking about Obama's legacy is going to be dismantled by Trump, not realizing that Obama's foreign policy legacy is literally being preserved in the Trump White House. We're still in Afghanistan. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to make that. Let me retract a little bit of that statement. I don't know if we're still in 7 wars like we were before under Obama. So I can't entirely make that comment. I can tell you, if you don't believe the seven conflicts we were in, I have a list of them. Right here, it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, Libya, which he destroyed, that Libya, that last one, and Somalia. And by the way, his drone strikes, which I find really amusing when I mention this to people who back him, none of them can endorse this idea. Internal sources, so the actual intergovernment polling, found out that these strikes were only effective a tenth of the time. So 90% of the casualties behind these strikes were of the wrong people. And this is the guy who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Give me a break. And to really keep this going, you have a lot of people who, if you ask them what is your opinion of George W., they will tell you they couldn't stand him. He was a horrible man, terrible guy. Um, the awful nightmare that Obama took over after to clean things up. And when you look at people when Obama came into office and people when Obama left office, I had a hard time. Yeah, I know that's a joke, Brian. I had a hard time actually believing I was still in the same world. And look, I've tried to. It's not, you can't entirely blame one president for everything, but one of the issues I've had with the current market of capitalism is that it's rendered half of the American population impoverished to where a at least half of us, could be more, the last time I checked, are not able to afford $1,000 emergency. That's a failed system. Um, and it could be argued that it has more to do with the regulatory or lack thereof actions toward the banks. A lot of times I've tried to tell people about Citizens United and the oligarchy with American politics. And let me repeat this in very simple terms because I want people to not forget this concept. When you have a person running for a statewide position or a national position, especially in a bigger state, oftentimes that takes excesses of money, money that a lot of us won't even make in our lifetime. Um, and what these rich individuals do is take that candidate, whether it's someone for president or someone for governor or senator, and have them, make a backroom deal where they say, "Look here, buddy, I'll give you $1 million, but when you get in office, you better vote for, if you're a senator, that bill that gives me and my wealthy friends a tax cut, to where now the people at the bottom have to pay more, while me and my already well-to-do friends pay less." And if you are, running for governor, it's going to be the same case, or not senator, but governor. So just, they want you to actually sign a bill that has that kind of legislative background. And what I've tried to convey to people, and it's actually been slightly more evident since he's left office, because if you can any of you remember the first story we heard about him in his, wonderful post presidency? I can. It was in April of last year, where he was reported to be giving a speech to Wall Street for $400,000. And people actually tried to defend this. They said, he should be able to get the amount of cash he wants. He shouldn't be subject to criticism from people who aren't getting that. My argument has been the fact that the person can, go and give a speech to whoever they want, for all I care. But you're not looking at the bigger picture, because this confirms how indoctrinated he was with Wall Street. And look, a lot of times people, when they go and reassess his tenure in office, and they look at a lack of accomplishments um, that he made, you're going to have people who will say, "Oh, Obama couldn't get anything through because the Republicans were blocking everything and they were stopping uh, him from being able to pass anything." But let's remember, let's go back to the period of his first 2 years in office. It was 2009 to 2011. He had the House and he had the Senate. He had the historical precedent of being the first minority individual to hold the highest office in the land. There was never a period where perhaps any commander in chief could have exercised more leverage over political adversaries to advance a goal. We say hello to O'Donohue. Yeah, we're just in here cleaning up these claims that people don't want to recognize about an individual who is having most of what he did continued to this day. And it's really sad because I've tried to explain to people. I think that the choices in both of his election cycles were comparatively awful. So, for example, I'll take Obama over McCain because I genuinely believe McCain would have had us in 20 or 30 different countries, as stipulated by his own foreign policy. If you look at Romney, I don't see much difference. And what I find so astonishing about people is that they don't like to hold politicians to the words that they conveyed during their campaigns. If you go back to Obama's reelection campaign, he pledged, or rather promised, a public option for his healthcare program. Here we are 5 years later, still nothing. Am I the only one who remembered that? I shouldn't have been. But see, it becomes almost astonishing to sit here year after year and have people and it's become even more apparent with Trump being in office. They criticize Trump for things that are on the level of just retardation because they can't go over anything of substance because they know then they're going after pretty much everybody holding office right now. For example, if they criticize Trump for some tweet that he wrote out, yeah, you can make the distinction. Obama was a classy person, didn't have any of these feuds, in spite of what he said about Kanye behind closed doors, but whatever. Um, but if they start talking about his decision to stay in Afghanistan, they can't get any more mad at him than they were at Obama, and they don't want to get mad at him because they want to keep pressing this narrative about how different Trump is from everyone that was in office before him, when in reality there is a continuity that has been going on since 2001 with the Patriot Act, this surveillance state where the government can spy and wiretap, violating the Fourth Amendment, um, as well as these constant and consistent wars. And we're not talking about, oh, we're over here for a year like the Gulf War. We're talking about staying somewhere. Think about this. I'll give you an example. Afghanistan's been going on since 2001. I was 3 when that war started. And people have this thing where they can't recognize if someone has a conflict go on year after year after year after year, they can make change, especially if they're the commander in chief. I'm supposed to believe that they're just so caught up and they can't get out of there. No, he wanted the war because the contractors that gave him money during his campaign said, "Hey, look, you keep this thing going so we can get some more cash for these from these bullets and tanks and other weaponry that we're using over here." It's called the military industrial complex. They allow themselves to become immersed in various battles and bloodshed for the sake of turning a profit. It's why we don't see a solution to the issue of gun control over here. Why ask yourself, you Republican, why would I go and work on actually regulating these firearms when I can get thousands or millions of dollars from the NRA to not do so? It's all a pyramid scheme of trying to net the most cash that you can. That's why, Obama's what, 56? I guarantee you that, because these presidents are living longer and longer, it can be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. The number one thing you are going to remember him for after he was out of office was going around making paid speeches, not helping anyone or assisting. But, that's something we can get into at a later date. The reason I'm bringing that up, however, is to show you that I think as time goes on and people see the kind of selective clique that these modern era office holders surround themselves in, they'll become a lot less likely to buy into all of that nonsense about because this person's a Democrat, they're for the common man, when they're hanging out with all of their millionaire buddies and you and 50% of the country can't afford $1,000 emergency. Half the country is poor, and I'm supposed to be concerned about Trump's rhetoric, as opposed to Trump continuing Obama's "I'm going to pretend the banks aren't a problem" policy. See if anything else on here is problematic. Uh, if any of you are familiar with the Espionage Act and what that entails, you've probably heard about Obama throwing journalists behind bars for doing their job. And it's funny to sit here and watch people get upset with Trump talking about leakers and various people who are exposed, who quote unquote are exposing the dysfunction in the White House right now, when the same thing's been going on for much longer. And we were on the side of Obama. The media was on Obama's side. How dare these people go and leak classified information? Snowden's a crook. That's their perspective. They would probably, and if Obama had his way, he would probably put him in Guantanamo Bay or have him just face the death penalty. But this is, again, someone who earned the Nobel Peace Prize. This is someone who I'm supposed to, the guy who supports 70% of the world's dictatorships, who bombs who is at war with 7 different countries. This is the person who deserves Nobel Peace Prize. It couldn't be more ironic. And the saddest thing about them giving him that award so early into his term is that they weren't able to see the full ramifications of telling someone who hasn't been tested yet, as to how much they're committed to not having these different conflicts, um, what they're actually about. And it's sad because you had people who for years were operating on this basis of, well, Obama can't help me because he has all of these foreign initiatives, and he has to do all this other stuff. No, that was the mindset of, I shouldn't expect assistance, again, on the national level from the federal government. That's nonsense. He chose not to have a jobs program. That wasn't the fault of, McConnell or any of these other Republicans. No senator or congressman stopped him from starting that. But again, I'm supposed to believe that the only reason his legacy is not prestigious is because of congressional disapproval. Far from it. It's not good because you had a person who lied, um, in their positions, and literally went out of their way to just get votes. So think about both Trump and Obama during their initial presidential campaigns, at least, was that it was believable that you had someone who actually was concerned and cared about you. Remember, Trump had no record. Obama, pretty much, if you actually look at his Senate career, was terrible, but whatever. Um, and with people who, again, have little record, you can go and buy more into stuff they're saying. But when that's accompanied by actions over the next couple of years, which is what I'm trying to convey people to understand now, that's why it's harder for me to just accept, oh yeah, you can just keep thinking he was there for you and he was so good, and we've now seen it. It's been revealed. Um, and you had people are talking about Trump not having a position on, what was it, net neutrality, which is correct. Look at Obama on gay rights. You oppose same-sex marriage in 2008. Then during 2012, you say, well, you know what? Romney's really opposed to gays getting together. I have to make sure that I'm able to net their votes. Let's wait. This is how slick he was. I'm going to wait until they've casted their votes, and then I'm going to announce, after they can't do anything to me, that I am now suddenly a backer of gay rights. By they, I'm referring to, the more indoctrinated Catholics who, don't like the idea of people who are in love getting together. That nonsense. But whatever. We'd be here all day talking about the fallacies of religion. Let me say a little friendly, man. Man, everybody's just being quiet. No commentary. So what I'm trying to convey to people, um, with this stream, is to say that you have individuals who have been duped across both parties, individuals who've ran for president across both parties who have tricked select groups to back them. Think about this. Obama got over 90% of the African American vote. Now it's public information. Clinton started the mass incarceration of African Americans, just the explosion of the prison population. And he didn't do that because, blacks became, as his wife called us, super predators. It was the direct result of the three strikes rule, drug offenses now being, having harsher penalties, changes in laws. And, these aren't changes I agree with in particular. I actually despise these changes because they've meant that a lot of people who aren't violent, are now in jail over drugs that I think should be legalized. But that, again, that's something that is not topical to this. So Obama sees this. And what is his record on the prison system? He becomes the first sitting president to visit the jail. And I'm supposed to believe that this is the guy who deserves 90+% of the African American vote. The same guy who scolds African American fathers for not being there for their children and ignores the fact that it takes two to tango to produce a child. Whatever. That's a story for another day. And also, what I find even stranger is that, um, you have these groups because a lot of times people sit there and say to themselves, but the Democrats, they're for everyone that isn't a rich Caucasian. Well, if that's true, and Trump was so awful toward Hispanics, why did Obama deport what was it, that hundreds of thousands of them per, per year in his tenure? The reason you didn't hear about this, they would wait until the late of the night. There would be no media coverage, and just whisk them away. And it's more than Bush. It's more than Clinton. Clinton actually, I think he had maybe 800,000, and then Obama had a couple millions. The numbers are posted online, but he did more than both Clinton and Bush. Um, and yet, for whatever reason, he's seen as some ally of Hispanics and other groups that are known to have populations that come to the U.S. They call Trump appealing to nativists. What about the guy who said, "I'm going to be a nativist, but just shh, be very, very quiet"? Okay, so what said he was trying uh, was this digest or disgust? Clarify. I don't know which one you mean. You can tell me. I'll be very satisfied with that. No, it is a disgusting record. I'm just telling you, it is one I a lot of us, for example, who grew up, I was what 10 when he got elected, wanted to believe in this idea of, oh, here comes the guy who's going to be for us. Here comes the guy who's going to do things for the common man, who's going to know what it's like to come from middle class group and actually try to support and back that group. When in reality, um, you were met with the complete reverse. This was a guy who did good things as a community organizer, um, ran for the Senate on a progressive platform, sits in there and does practically nothing except give a speech here or there for 3 years, and tour a couple of countries, say, hey, what's up, take some pictures. Then, from his lack of record, runs with all these promises and pledges that are very similar to what Bernie espoused during his last presidential primary for the Democrats. And then when he gets in office, it's a complete reverse because Wall Street says to himself, well, you know what? That's a nice looking one. I think he could beat McCain. Let's start throwing some dollars at him. And he takes the blood money. He takes this cash. And you have to understand when he's addressing these groups that are afflicted negatively by things he's done. So, for example, if he's going in front of Hispanics and telling them about how he wants them to do well, and he's doing DACA and then deporting, um, you know, thousands of them via his own immigration policy, he's sitting here giving you this speech and then stabbing you in the back like Judas, and you don't realize it, or when you do, it's too late because now he's had both of his terms in office. And people only start getting more upset after a guy who's a little bit more outspoken, who is, I'm sorry, very much more outspoken with it, decides to come forward and wins the next election cycle. But make no mistake, both had a nativist stance of, I'm going to get rid of as many of you as I can. The only difference is one is verbal about it, the other was, shh, be very, very quiet. The dark depths of politics. Explain that, Brian. Friendly says he was a good president, but not the greatest. Explain how he was good. I said he was mediocre. I'd give him maybe a 4 or a 5 out of 10. You don't get to have me in 7 wars for no reason other than to put dirty paper in the pockets of people who already had too much of it to begin with, and then you're good or great. You don't get to sit here and talk about your sympathy for the plight of African Americans like Trayvon Martin, but then have multiple individuals who are the same race as you and him sit up in prison over dumb offenses doing this. Brian says, I see what you're saying. Obama was a more subtle version of what we previously had. No, he was, look, on a social um, policy level, I didn't have that much of a problem with him. It's when you go into the continuation of Bush's foreign policy, which is now being continued by Trump, um, and even more disastrous records again in Libya. Hillary would have done the same. She was just a lesser. No, no, no. Again, Brian, make no mistake. I am no fan of Trump or Hillary or any of them. I said before during this past election cycle, I didn't vote for Clinton or Trump. I voted third party for the Libertarian. Not the yeah, yeah. So the point I'm making to you is I recognize the similarities between both of those candidates. Like I said, a lot of people stayed home because they knew there was no way to vote against Goldman Sachs or more wars or lack of action on the banks. It was literally one's more open about their hostilities, one is less. And as much as I sit here and people talk about, oh, these minority groups would be in such better hands if Clinton was in there, I can't guarantee that. I'm supposed to believe the same woman who called African American super predators would have been so great for that group. The same person that was right in there with her husband deporting, I think it was 800,000 illegal immigrants, would have been sympathetic towards those who are just coming here for a better life. Yeah, miss me on that one. I'd be sympathetic, but again, I'm not them. Never have the working man in mind. I feel like, yeah. Uh, again, I'm nodding with you, but what I'm saying is that they usually friendly says they usually don't. No, I concur. I'm not. I keep trying to explain to people this is not a matter of party. It's a matter of fact, and I hate the fact that so many individuals suck on the nipple of establishment media that they see on their television that doesn't tell them about the casualties of war um, that have occurred while Obama was in office, the lack of action on the banks, the anything. They keep it quiet. The imprisonment of journalists for doing their job under the Espionage Act by Obama. Obama authorizing Democratic mayors during Occupy Wall Street to crack people's heads open for protesting. None of it gotten into or spoken about or anything. It's just pushed to the back burner. And you have these people who, and it's kind of funny. When I first became more vocal with my disposition toward him, I had a lot of, let me read this. Brian says, but war is expected to come with casualties. You have to squeeze a few oranges to make juice. Again, what benefit was the war? If you're talking about Iraq, we invaded the wrong country. And we're actually, if any of you have paid attention, using that same resolution to go to these other countries. Think of how messed up that is. They are using the resolution that allowed them to go to war with Iraq to go into Pakistan, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, and a lot of those countries Bush didn't even attack. It was Obama who started that. So I don't, like I said before, um, I have a hard time believing that the person who engages in a conflict that we didn't need, other than to fill the pockets of people who already rich, is somehow worthy of the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't get it. Envoy says war is often for business gains. America's tendency of sticking their noses in matters which do not pertain to them. Yeah, that's why we keep trying to be Israel's. We're like Israel's nutsack. We can't escape the uh, the fact that they've allowed this lack of peace between them and the Palestinians under Netanyahu to stay as, and actually Obama's record on Israel um, wasn't that bad, other than giving them that what was it, $1 billion, $3 billion, I think. That was terrible. But actually saying outright, oh my God. Let me respond to Brian. I identify as a liberal. I do not identify with either party. I think both parties are corrupt with very few differences. Does that answer your question? Again, I could just as easily talk about Trump for a half an hour. It's not hard. They both have significant gaps in their quality, and I hate the fact that they have these cultish type supporters who try to make it seem as if they were great or even good. And look, I can understand that it's 2000 or 2016, and all you have from the person is basically word of mouth and supposed random acts of kindness. But other than that, I don't get it. And what is so disturbing is that Obama was able to trick African Americans by surrounding himself with these various black celebrities who he didn't care about before and seeming to be very much into culture, all the while allowing multiple members of that ethnic group to sit incarcerated for ridiculous drug offenses. And look, listen, half of the African Americans that are in jail right now are over the three strikes rule, or some other offense having to do with possession of drugs, not, beating someone's face in or anything else that's actually violent. It's like 48 or 49%. Obama didn't call the governors of various states and tell them to let them go, or, try to make some federal law that allowed these drugs to be legalized so you couldn't be imprisoned over the drop of a hat. He didn't care. Obviously, it's kind of annoying have to identify to a party in the first place. I don't, because it's always changing and there's bad ideologies on both sides. Uh, Brian says the war on drugs put us in a heap of political downpour. If that never happened, who knows where we would be? Yeah, but that's like me saying, okay, well, um, if I don't know, the Gulf War never happened, we would have never had the wars afterward. The fact is, it occurred, and the response by the Democrats after losing the 1988 election was to become more right wing. And how did they become more right wing? They ran Clinton, who was in favor of the death penalty, against gay marriage, um, quote unquote tough on crime, who likened himself as a moderate Democrat that was somewhere between being a liberal and a conservative, and called himself trying to be more like the party that started the war on drugs. So instead of that, you saw a spike in those incarcerated because the offenses um, became much harsher under his tenure. So even if you go and say that it's that the war on drugs is the catalyst for this, the Democrats as a party still chose to run someone who came off as taking the elements that they thought made Republicans successful. And Obama tried to keep these things going during his 2008 and 2012 campaigns. But he softened his approach on gay marriage to court um, the vote. Actually, no, I take that back. He stated his opposition to it to get the vote of those that were opposed to it. Then after they couldn't vote for him anymore, goes, "Oh yeah, I'm in favor of it. I like it. It's so good." So I really have little tolerance for him. Okay, let me read what else is written here. But yeah, I hope that people have saw through the cracks. Um, I don't know what you mean by that, friendly. Do you want to get to know more information about it, or run for something, or what? I don't understand. Clarify. 'Cause like I said, there's the really disturbing tinge to all these issues I brought up here, and it's the fact that you had a group that voted for a man because he looked like them and did everything systematically to screw them over. And it's disturbing when you sit here and you watch. Let me read this. Ryan said, "It doesn't matter who we put into politics; they will always be corrupted by money and privilege." If you truly have that view, that is a mindset that does not entail anything of any decency coming about. It's like if I say, it doesn't matter who I let in my stream, they will always ask me a dumb question and waste my time. If I go into it with that perspective and then someone comes around doing the opposite, I'm going to assume, well, at some point they're going to say something dumb and waste my time. I'm just waiting on it. So that view is not one I'm really going to subscribe to. Like I said, you guys act like there's not a root cause for these issues. Like I said, go look up Citizens United. Go look up campaign finance laws. The oligarchy is the result of a lack of regulations on the banks and on how these campaigns are financed. The reason people are able to buy out these politicians is a direct result of a refusal to look into what is a corrupting factor during these campaigns by people who are in office. Because the people who are in office and can actually pass laws to change these things are taking money from special interest groups and corporations that stick their finger in their face and say, "Hey, you better vote this way. You better vote that way." So it's not hard to get the root problem. I need people to stop giving up and start realizing the issue is right in front of you. There is open bribery in America when it comes to these election cycles. And the more people sit here and try to pretend that, oh man, everybody just doesn't care about me and they can't be made to care. No, any true change in the U.S. has always occurred from mass protest and demonstrations. Um, a lot of times you talk about reaching across the aisle and we'll get the best thing out of that. Forget that. Um, when you look at the Civil Rights Act, that was the direct result of a movement. That was the result of people in office who backed that movement. That was the result of having someone in office who knew it was time to create a difference in regards to laws and legislation. Same thing happened with the Voting Rights Act. And really that's just how things get done as far as actually correcting problems. You have groups right now that are dedicated to fixing these election cycles so that corrupt people like Obama and George W. and Trump can't get in office anymore. They're called Wolf Pack. They're called just any group that does not Justice Democrats. As much as I couldn't stand them for what they did to Cenk back in December. They're another example. Cowboy said, I think you know JD, but I'm a big wrestling fan. Even brought her way into Trump's White House. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Again, he's corrupt. Listen, he was able to he was slick, or more slicker than Obama, because what he did was he said, I'm going to pay for my own stuff. Then in that general election, he said, oh my God, this is really expensive. I can't do this anymore. And then all that money from the RNC that was coming from, all the little bankers, dirty, filthy, probably unscrubbed pockets, just started peeking out and appearing. And now you've started to see it more and more. And see what people need to understand is that even Trump, when he ran, um, might have intended to do those things, but he became corrupt in the process of sitting there and being given these big loads and loads of dollars. And we've seen politicians turn down money from certain groups and certain people if they think it is going to corrupt them. Obama refused to because he is corrupt, or at least was anyway while he was running for office. Still is anyway, in my opinion. Um, and is a right winger who was able to be elected after sitting in the Senate and doing nothing for 3 years and wasting both the time of the people of Illinois and the time of the people who backed his campaigns with false promises that once he got in office fell apart as he continued the very hawkish, downright deplorable, and in some cases, bloodbath foreign policy of his direct predecessor, as well as the surveillance state of that same person that allows the government to tell you, hey, screw your privacy. We're going to investigate you just because we think something happened or we don't like you. And this was all allowed to go on. And it becomes so frustrating to sit here um, and know about these things and just keep trying to repeat them stream to stream, because I want people to actively think to themselves, even if you don't think I'm telling the truth, go look up what I've said in this video. He bombed, or rather went to war with 7 countries. A person who took 90+% of the African American vote was able to keep large portions of African Americans in jail over drug offenses and did nothing to reverse them. A person who called himself backing Hispanics with DACA deported God knows how many of them through through these, raids at night. Envoy says, yup, but Obama is charismatic, though. He is exonerated because he was so colorful. Oh, I know. That, yeah, never mind those 7 conflicts where, uh, you know, 90% of the people who were striked by his drones were proven to not be the people that were targeted. So that means that when you use these deadly attacks, they only have a 10% chance of accuracy. Never mind the fact that he said, "Screw democracy. Let me go and imprison journalists who accurately reported on the hells of my government with the Espionage Act." It was the one good thing that came out of that time period for me was in realizing that it doesn't matter if the person is your ethnicity or any other one, as long as they are a corrupt individual who seeks to spew blood for dollars, who seeks to screw over the middle class for more dollars for their campaigns. It shouldn't be of any concern you what that person looks like. That was the one good thing that came out of that time of him being in the White House, directly affecting me. Envoy says even the whole Bin Laden notification was controversial because we don't even know him. He knew what the government fed us. Um, yeah, that could be a whole separate stream. But again, my purpose behind all of this is to tell people, stop buying what the media sells you. The reason you have an internet now, and the reason it's so good to have net neutrality, another good thing Obama did in that, little bucket of decent things that came out of that nightmarish tenure, is in being able to look at and then realize what someone is telling you. If you don't believe anything I've said here, if you think I'm just spewing all kinds of levels of sacrilege, go and look up any of this stuff. I encourage it, because you will see that you have been lied to by establishment media and have been effectively had information kept from you in regards to these wars, in regards to the surveillance state. It's all been hidden because of that cute smile that they think he had. I'm not going to insult how he looks or anything, but it goes back to character over style over substance, or personality over policy. And it's the same reason Trump was elected. It's all a pattern of, let's stop caring about what people are actually doing in office. I like this person, and that's it. And I guarantee you couldn't see this anywhere else. If I went from talking about all the ways that the Democrats and Republicans were awful to making a video and going, oh man, they're such great people and I like them so much, no one would watch that, because you would know I shifted on you and was a turncoat like Obama was on gay rights, lying to Catholic voters to get them to back him, while he had this devious plan in his mind to actually screw over their belief system, mind you, not mine. I was fine with this. I was happy that happened. And support homosexuals having the right to marry, which he should have done in the first place if he was so liberal and different from conservatives. But he didn't, because he wanted to get the votes from statistically whatever group could back him more. So again, he lied to religious groups. He lied to African Americans. He lied to middle class Americans with nothing on the banks, to Hispanics. Every group was deceived, tricked, and treated like trash, except the rich. They were the only ones who were given true equality and actually prospered under his tenure. The envoy says exactly, which is why I can see the likes of Oprah running for the presidency. Maybe not her, but celebrity with no background in politics, because they got followed on social media. Oh yeah, I already told you, man. Like the thing with Cenk earlier. Here you had a guy who got in trouble over some posts that were written 20 plus years ago, whatever. He apologizes. People refuse to, just let it go. But then you have this woman in Oprah who backs Iraq, and then all of a sudden it's not this liberal hero. She gets to have a character arc while he doesn't. But again, that shows you the level of just backwards, hypocritical thinking that people have with policies and ideas rather. He ain't swag. Yeah, he was hip. He was able to be hit, to be seen as hip by all of these people who voted for him both times. Again, part of the game of deception and trickery. So I know that this stream won't get as many views as the other content that seems to riddle this channel now, but I think it's one of the more substantive, actually informative things to have come out of this year. Convoy says fame over talent, popularity over policy, style over being earnest. It's all part of the game. Yeah, he played it, and he was able to get the okie doke on most people twice. And I can only hope that that style of politicking, as one would call it, is dying out, and it seems like it is. People, you see what's going on with my Senator Harris. She knows she can't play the same game. That people are not as indoctrinated in that as one might think. At least when they were in 2008. So 10 years can make a difference. I just hope that we get out of this idea. Say what it is, Envoy. I'm waiting. Because I'm getting close to ending the stream. I would understand Trump being president in the 60s or 70s. I wouldn't, but continue. Back in the 60s and 70s, they didn't have loads and loads of cash that you had to sell yourself out for to get in the office. People still had to get loads of money, but they didn't have to completely switch their views and do me this backroom favor. Heck, if you go and look at there was a senator from Mississippi that his name was Stennis. He was uh, given a ship with his name when he retired from the Senate. He was in there for 40, I think 41 years. And when he was giving his speech reminiscing when he first ran for office back in the late 40s, he said it didn't cost much to run back then. So this isn't something and I also want you to understand, comparatively speaking, this issue of politicians being bought out really has only been going on since maybe the 80s, 70s. No, really the early 80s and then proceeding downward. So it's not like we could go back to 1880 and have the same issue. That wasn't even a thing back then. A lot of time, if you go back to those early campaigns, people didn't even get out of their house. They would just sit at home till William Jennings Bryan came around and changed everything. That's a story for another stream. So let me read this. In this day and age, with information being so readily available, you would think it would be harder to pull a proverbial wool over people's eyes. Yeah, you would think, but I told you, people have they have been allowed to get away with knowing the bare minimum about how things are actually going, and then getting surprised when something of just extreme awfulness happens. You had a lot of Hillary supporters who voted for her just because they knew what her name was, over Bernie. And so when this very unpopular candidate, loses to Trump, they get shocked. Uh, it is what it is. That when they sit there and they listen to that establishment media and their little friends are saying first woman president, instead of policy and what she'll actually do and how different it is from the guy who's in office, no care concern whatsoever. So it's all a cycle that seems like it'll never end. Um, but one that I get hopeful for, because even people who have those personality tics I don't like, are waking up to this, and I am satisfied with that. So I see a small window of hope that tells me we won't see the likes of Obama again. Uh, and that's not a direct shot at him. That's a direct shot at this empty suit candidate who promises so much and then delivers on so little. So thank you for watching. I will have something else out maybe tonight, definitely tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thank you.